Hi, so welcome to this week's demonstration painting. So here I am a bit earlier today up at my studio, and before we start I'll just say a quick apology. I seem to have got a little bit of wobble on the camera, but hopefully that won't be too distracting. So today I'm doing a master copy. Here's the reference. This is a painting by Edward Seago, a painter I've admired for many years now, really since discovering his work by chance, just looking through the books at Waterstones many years, probably about 20 years ago now, and they had two of these large editions of their collections of Edward Seago's paintings. So I was so taken with them, I bought both copies, and they have served me very well over the years, and not that easy to get hold of now. So he was a artist. He was based up near me. I live in Suffolk in the UK, and Edward Seago came from Norfolk, which is the county just north north of Suffolk. And in fact, me and Rosa were camping around there recently last year, in very close to where Seago lived. So as you can see, I'm blocking in here. Now, my sense of looking at Seago's paintings is that he didn't rely on a sort of denser, darker underpainting. I think he went in basically laying in colour. So what I'm doing here is laying in warm and cool. So yellow ochre for the yellow and French ultramarine. Now at the end of this painting you can see how I got on, but I'm already of the opinion that maybe the blue, the French ultramarine, I think in the original might have nudged a bit more towards purple. I think maybe picking up the yellow ochre just nudged it, made it a bit sort of greeny, a bit warm. Whereas, yes, I think the original had a slightly more of a violet hint. But, you know, that is one of the great things about doing these master copies, is you learn about the artists that you're interested in. Also from Seago's sort of start, I'm working quickly here. So Seago had a boat, and he would go out and sort of set up, and then he could make these quite quick sketches. And painting quickly like this, I think it might also be related to the fact that he was a great watercolor artist as well as an oil painter. So you have to work quick. And one of the great things about Seago's work is he gets these little effects that you cannot really achieve through a sort of laboured, more concentrated approach. You can often see it's just a flick of the wrist, flick of the arm, and he manages to get these great effects. So in some respects I'm trying my best to emulate that and just work maybe a bit quicker than I might otherwise do in the studio. So there we are. I've laid in my base colour, and having established the general sort of mood of the sky, these warm and cools, I'm starting to block in which I think you could probably call the centre of interest, which is the tower here. And again, although it's a simple sort of silhouetted shape, it's a really, again, a great example of, you know, perspective. You have to sort of have a sense of where that horizon line is. Obviously this cathedral or sort of church is well above our horizon line, and therefore those diagonals need to be going down to an imaginary vanishing point, perhaps off the picture plane. So getting the diagonals is important, and also getting the general sense of scale of the building is important as well. So there I'm just putting in underneath the roof, although I block it in just to try and get the sense of how that roof, or the lip of the roof, is going to be coming down. Now, in terms of composition, this composition I would call the overall effect of this painting is a bit like a wedge. That's how I've just, so it's like a triangle. So it's large at one end of the painting and then goes to a thinner end at the other side. And in this case, it's basically three masses really, which is the dark mass of the village echoed in the water. So our wedge is basically our dark sort of shape. And then you have the mass of the sky and the mass of the water. And as you see, I've basically done the sky and the water as the same thing initially, because the water is always going to be sort of echoing the colours and values that are in the sky. So here, just trying to get the silhouette of some of these little trees. And again, it's a great lesson in sort of both simplicity of painting when you look at Seago, but it doesn't sacrifice, you know, there is observation there. You know, the buildings, or the suggestion of the buildings, it recedes at the right rate. They're in perspective. So, and again, it's an interesting one, because although Seago works so quickly, you can really tell that behind his brush marks just lie a very accomplished sense of design, drawing, observation, perspective, all those sorts of things. So although the overall mass of the wedge here is dark, I'm sort of taking a bit of time here just to establish the drawing and the tops of these roofs. And again, with these sorts of silhouettes, you're really looking for variety. So different sized trees, in the intervals between those little sort of rooftops, the chimneys, nothing too repetitive. Okay, you're trying to mimic the sense of sort of nature, and you try not to go dot 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 too repetitive. So there we are, just getting a shadow shape under the roof line there. That just helps explain that. And here we go, blocking in. So the colours that I used for this painting, I used Naples yellow, which is a sort of warm, creamy yellow, then some yellow ochre. And I did put a little bit of red out. I think it might have been a warm red, like cadmium red. And if I'd have had burnt sienna, I think that would have been enough for my red, but I didn't have any to hand. So in the cases where I need to warm up those sort of brownish tones, I just use the red. French ultramarine for my blue, and some burnt umber. And it's a very sort of it's a very understated painting. It's much more, I would say it's more of a tonal study. I mean, the colours work a treat, but they're very sort of naturalistic and quite subdued, so no need for lots of different colours on the palette for this one. Again, looking to echo that diagonal. So the diagonal in the reflection, the diagonal on the top of the church, they all need to sort of imply the same vanishing point. And here we are, just so this is the reflection, so it's important here that everything is, you're mirroring the trees, the tree line, trying to get that sort of relatively accurate, and that all helps contribute to the sense that you're actually looking at reflection. And here I've just blocked in this. Now what he does here is the general principle with reflections is the darks the dark reflections need to be ever so slightly lighter, and the lights ever so slightly darker, so you bring all the tonal values a bit closer together. So in this case there's quite a nice, it's mainly yellow ochre here, just providing these sort of the warmish colours in these reflections. So no sense at the moment of trying to think about water, just a case of trying to echo that silhouette relatively accurately. Okay. So when I was studying art, both at A level and at college, there wasn't really any encouragement to copy famous artists, which I think is a real shame. I think in traditional art education, if you go back, there would have been much more copying. And I understand part of the theory is that, you see, when you copy, you're sort of what's the word? You're going to be picking up the habits of something that's gone before. So one of the themes of contemporary art, or what we might call modern art, is the quest for originality. But most painting is probably better thought of almost as a craft. So in the same way of learning, say, making furniture or making tables or chairs, first off, you would learn how to make a chair, and you wouldn't just make it up. You would learn certain patterns, certain designs. And then once you have those techniques down and the craft down, then you start to think about your own designs and sort of personalizing it. And my experience of being taught art was that so much is missed by not really concentrating on the craft of painting. So, and very early on, really sort of after I left university, I started to look more at artists and do master copies like this. And I found it overall I found it a very useful experience. It's something I encourage my students to do, and not to have any sense of, oh, it's copying, but really to look at it as an exercise of learning, especially with artists like Seago, because you're never really going to get, in a way, his style was so spontaneous and sort of quick that you will never really you're never going to make a sort of photographic replica of it, but in it you will learn certain things about sort of speed and gesture and mark making and all those sorts of things. So it is a very valuable exercise, as well as he was very good at sort of compositional design and tonal design, playing darks against light, sort of interchange, and really sort of making landscapes come alive through his understanding of like light, design, composition, that sort of thing. So I'm just making extra special effort here that my sort of main verticals here of the church and the reflection of the church really are sort of mirrored as accurately as possible. So if they're wrong, it will harm the effect of the reflection. So as it happened, I didn't speed this one up at all. I think overall it took me about I think half an hour or so, which again is probably not unlike if Seago was out painting. Once you see, once you've got such a grasp of what you're doing, the fundamentals, then you can work quite quickly and get good results. And in some respects, working quickly will also bring out chance effects that you wouldn't get in a more laboured, deliberate way. But it's not easy, you know. You will make mistakes, and even when I did this, I made mistakes, and it's unforgiving in some respects because you can't just fiddle with it and fiddle with it and get it right. In some respects, the more you fiddle with it, you'll lose that sense of freshness that I think makes someone like Edward Seago's work so appealing. Now, as you can see, my studio is very dark, so I deliberately so it's a little porter cabin that I have access to, and I painted all the interior dark. And this was for still life painting. I didn't want too much light bouncing around, but I think it's Rosa wasn't very keen on me painting the smell of terps in the house. I wasn't going down very well, so I thought it'd be better to do my paintings back out at the studio. I say there's no one around at the moment, so it's not too risky, I don't think. So here it's all just suggestions of things. There's again another, that line above the red, that's just a roof line, so that's again suggesting the perspective. But as you can say, all these buildings within the mass of the village, they all basically sort of merge. It still retains the sense of being one thing almost. So the variations between each building are quite subtle. And here I've switched to a rigger brush to lay in the windows. So although it's good to, as long as possible, I would say, you know, try to work with a bigger brush, and that will keep the marks big and fresh. With this painting, I did need to go to this smaller rigger brush just to lay in some detail here. A few window shapes and that's another cast shadow under a roof there. Some little suggestions. Buildings. And of course the trick here is to go out into nature, and you know what, one of the things with Seago is, yeah, I think if you went where he was, you would be aware of the degree to which he'd simplified the scene. So the challenge is to go out into nature yourself, find a spot, and again you have to simplify, but this gives you some clues really. Now this is one of the points where I think I wasn't very happy with, and again, so this isn't very Seago-esque in that I am being quite sort of deliberate there, and I felt that was a bit too, either a bit too tall on the one hand, and it just didn't have that sort of the delicacy of the original. And this is where you really sort of, those little touches like the getting the spire right there, you know, the sort of master touches that I think you can see in Seago's work, and they're not easy to reproduce, I have found. Things like how he does people, and so here we go, we just tweak this. I think I just brought it down slightly. And of course, what's frustrating is it is almost like the focal point of the painting. So, but yeah, I mean, I think in the end it worked okay, but it's nice to get these things first time off. Again, just trying to being mindful of the perspective there. A little bit on the roof helps with that. So I enjoy doing. I say doing these master studies is great practice. Last night on BBC4 they broadcast some Bob Ross. I think they said resurrected Bob Ross. I don't think I've ever seen Bob Ross on the BBC. Now, some of you may be aware of his work. Again, he was an artist that had quite an influence on me when I was at university. I came across people watching videos of Bob Ross. I think it was sort of around the time people started to get like broadband or cable TV. And I really liked Bob Ross's work. I say he's, you know, he's a bit cheesy in some respects, and not everyone's cup of tea. And of course, if you go to if you go to charity shops in this country, you often see like a Bob Ross, someone's go at a Bob Ross. But for me, it was really had a big impact on me because it was really the first time I'd seen a good demonstration of someone painting with oils. So very few of my teachers painted, certainly very few of them painted in front of us as students, which was a shame. So when I came across Bob Ross and saw the actual oil painting and the effects that he managed to achieve, that really inspired me. And I actually went out and bought oil paints off the back of seeing Bob Ross. And prior to that, I'd always been working in acrylics. So and I never went back to acrylics properly, although I have sort of I do use them occasionally. They're not bad, but I really liked oils, and so I put that down to Bob Ross. So I was thinking maybe as part of this series of master copies, I might have another go at Bob Ross at some point. So again, this cloud, I think maybe I felt I overstated it. It's wobbling around there, so sorry about that. But again, it points. In fact, it's not even particularly subtle, but it points us in towards our rooftop. And there I'm echoing. It's also doing a bit to sort of reinforce the perspective and the sense of depth. And I've done that cloud quite warm, so I'm also mixing some warm in with the blues on that side. And there, I think, using a bigger brush, I just softened the whole effect of the sky, because again, we don't want that to be too crisp or too loud in a way. So just softening it, pushing it all back a bit. There, I'm just dragging down. Again, that's partially to reinforce the sense of reflection. Just so again, more dragging down from the shoreline there. So just little tweaks here, a few little adjustments. Just trying to get some shadow under that shoreline. And here we are, just trying to graze on a bit more white just to give a sense. There we are. So, and as you can see, I've reserved the lightest lights for sort of close to the center and in the distance, basically. So this overall, the sky it's not quite a mid-tone, but it's not white. But then those little bits of Naples yellow just bringing the eye back through the composition. So yeah, my suggestion is, to have a go at doing a master copy at home. Say Edward Seago is a good one to start with. But I say I also like Monet as someone for students to look at, because Monet is very good at this thing of saying a lot but not having a lot and not having very busy compositions, and you can see that somewhat in this one as well. It's actually quite simple in terms of its overall design. um, Understanding simplicity in painting is it's something to work on, especially when you're choosing your subjects. Because here there is complexity in it, but a lot of it's implied, and it's implied underlying in a sort of in a fairly simple compositional design. So again, that's, you see, you've got a bigger cloud above it and then smaller, so that all helping to reinforce the sense of depth. And of course it suggests overlap, so carrying on from our last series, the buildings overlap those the shadows in the sky. We also have perspective. The wedge shape from the top of the church tower off into the distance, that diagonal is a very strong suggester of perspective and distance. And once you've established the big masses, these little touches that I'm doing here, this is what I like to think of as the icing on the cake, really. These are the um, little sort of touches that are hoping to improve the illusion of what you're looking at. But as you can see, they all sit on top of what is quite a simple design. So I'm not quite sure where this rocking came from. I think it must have been the stand I had my camera on. So I will, next time I'm filming up there, I will try and sort that out for you, because it's always when you're painting and trying to film it, actually where you put your camera, it's not the easiest thing to arrange, if any of you have tried it before. So again, little marks here suggesting the roofs. And the main thing here is for them not to detract, that they all need to be helping in some respect. So although it's very simple, it still needs to be accurate. Little touches of light there. And these are just what I'm really doing here is softening. It's really, it's trying to think what needs to be pushed back, what needs to be brought out more. So again, just softening this reflection, the transition between the lights and the darks there. There we go. Echoing the rooftops. And these little marks here are quite important. Again, they just help to bring out the form. So although I'm working on that silhouette, these little marks suggest the planes, the roof plane, and then the side of the church plane there. And there, I think I'm just making sure that I echo that red properly. And there we are. So you can see, you know, I've got some aspects of it. I was quite pleased with the brush marks, but as I say, his sky was much cooler than mine. So again, I think maybe more purple. And again, now I look at it also, the church, my church might be a bit tall. This looks a little bit wider there. So I would be, you know, it's the sort of thing I could return to and say it's a relatively quick study. But in some respects, I think that's one of the main lessons from Seago, which is, you know, is to work quickly to try and get some of that, you know, get those brush marks. So there we are. So there's the final painting. So as you can see, nice sort of loose energy to it, and a few little tweaks maybe next time I revisit the subject. But yeah, I was very pleased with that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, found that useful. Please like and subscribe, and look forward to seeing you next time.